Folks, welcome back to the Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs Gaming and Hotel. And we got some big things happening right now for Buffalo Sabres and big things happening here with @Mike_Bundt. Bunty, how are you feeling right now? Draft has happened. We're through the beginning stages of free agency. We're moving through July. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling good. It's the middle of summer. Great holiday weekend. Finally, some good weather in Buffalo. As far as the Sabres, that's another question. Are we ever really feeling great about the Buffalo Sabres? At least in the last decade and a half, probably not. But no, I'm feeling good, and I'm excited about this episode because we have a lot to talk about regarding Bowen Byram, the recent decision by the Sabres to elect to go to arbitration, trade ideas. How's the offseason going so far? I'm excited.
Yeah, this is a big episode, and I mean, something we've been talking about here on this podcast for, it feels like forever now. What are the Buffalo Sabres going to do with defenseman Bowen Byram? We thought that trade would happen before the draft. We get through our big draft, spectacular, nothing happens. That following week through free agency, still nothing there. And Bunty, it's July 7th as of today. The Sabres and Byram going to arbitration. That offer sheet will not happen. We're hearing talks. We're hearing rumors. Could it be St. Louis? They're really in on him. What do you think is going to happen with Bowen Byram right now? We are, at this point where are the Sabres going to sign him, bring him back for next season, or are they going to ship him off elsewhere and get that top six help I think they desperately need?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Before the offseason, it seemed like it was a sure thing that he was going to be traded. Now, if you ask me, is he going to be traded? I still believe he will be. I still think Byram will be gone before the season starts, but I'm a little less optimistic of that happening than I was before. What I've been struggling to get my head around is that one moment you hear 7-8 teams are inquiring about Byram, and then the next moment you get tweets like today where they say Kevyn Adams thinks the market has been softer than what he anticipated. So what is it? Has it been softer? Or are there really a bunch of teams in on him? Because we keep hearing St. Louis, we hear about Vegas, we hear a little bit about San Jose. There's been a couple different teams that have been mentioned throughout the process. My thought process is this. Are teams trying to fleece Kevyn Adams? Probably. But Kevyn Adams would be crazy to just give him away for next to nothing. In this arbitration situation, it really doesn't change a lot from the Sabres' point of view. I saw some people on social media saying, oh, this is bad. This is like not good news. Doesn't really impact much really for them.
Yes.
All it means is that Byram can no longer get an offer sheet, which actually kind of helps out the Sabres. Now they don't have to worry about somebody just taking him for nothing. And then the second scenario now, since he's going to go to arbitration, you really don't have to worry about a holdout if you don't find a trade. If something doesn't work out, the arbitrator is going to come up with a number that Byram will have to accept, and then assuming the Sabres go forward with it, Byram will either decide to sign on for a year or two. And I think my thought process the whole time was, if you could get a top six forward for Byram and maybe another piece or something, I would be okay with that. But if it was going to be picks and other futures and prospects, I wasn't really that intrigued about that. If Byram is paired with Dahlin, which we know he's good with Dahlin, and you have power with Kesselring and Timmins with Samuelsson, that's really not a bad defense group. And if you have him under contract for a couple years, is that really the worst thing in the world? Probably not. Now, if you do get him under contract for a year or two and you have all that unspent cap money, that's kind of unfortunate. But as we'll probably discuss later in the show, internal cap, how many years can they deny it before we really just accept it is what it is? Like they can deny it, but we all know it exists. But
especially after last year with that Skinner buyout, like that's where that conversation's there. And I think that's where a lot of people are frustrated now is, we're going through the beginning of free agency. You see that stat online that Kevyn Adams has never spent $10 million total in free agency on one player. That's not just AAV. That's combined contract after all the years signed has not exceeded $10 million. I think the most was Connor Clifton just 2 years ago, who was just shipped out. And Bunty, I think that's where, everyone wants that splash. I know we both kind of talked about when is that going to happen? Is that going to happen at this point? And it feels that we're just kind of in a game of limbo right now with Bowen Byram, where it feels like Adams wanted to make this move for that top six forward because it it wouldn't make sense to move Peterka, who had, the year he had last year, taking that step, but not fully there. And he gets paid 7.7 in Utah, to not bring in that top six scoring help. We see like the point leaders on the side here. They need that extra help in that top six when you have a guy like Zucker up there, McLeod. Like, these guys should be on the Sabres third line. They're in that top 5 for Sabres points. And I think that's what I want to see back, and that's what a lot of people want to see back, is that top 6 return. We look at St. Louis here, Dylan Holloway, Jake Neighbors, kind of those big names. I think ones that are at least probable on that front. How do you feel about these St. Louis Blues rumors? Are there any guys here that stick out to you that you'd want to see in Buffalo? And I know the mock trade season is always the most, you'll see the dumbest things online of players that don't make any sense. We see all these untouchables for Eichel years ago, but at the end of the day, like, what could you see coming back to Buffalo in a trade to St. Louis? Because that kind of seems like most probable right now.
Yeah, so I like all the names that you put here. Obviously, in my opinion, Dylan Holloway, that's the home run.
Yes.
Coming off the year, he just had 60-plus points, I think 27 goals. Young, was offer sheeted from Edmonton last summer. Holloway seems like the home run, but also seems kind of unrealistic without the Sabres adding some pieces to a deal. Jake Neighbors probably feels the most realistic at this point. And it's funny because if Jake Neighbors was on the Sabres and Buffalo was about to trade a guy like that, Sabres fans would be losing their minds right now. I'm not saying he's JJ Peterka, but like, you're talking about a guy that's like around, I think, 23 years old, who had 27 goals 2 years ago,
23
goals last year. So you're talking about a guy with a combined 49 goals the last 2 years versus Peterka, who had a combined 55. So both obviously great goal scorers. Neighbors with a lot of potential. Not the best point totals, but definitely a contributor. Some metrics don't love him, but I always kind of have some issues with Sabres fans when they talk about metrics, because there's a lot of players on the Sabres that don't have metrics that we fall in love with and say they're going to be something. And then to just automatically say, oh, when they leave, you look at a Neighbors, like situations and a lot of that other stuff factor in. Broberg is good. I believe another one of the defensemen that were offer sheeted by St. Louis from Edmonton. Young, but if you're going to trade a guy like Byram, why are you going to give up a good, talented young defenseman? I don't know if that makes the most sense. I guess maybe you see something more in Byram. And then Snuggerud, that's kind of the guy people have been throwing in because they believe that the Blues don't want to throw in Holloway or Neighbors, and that they maybe need to get somebody a little bit less NHL experience out there. All 4 of these names are good, and if you could package them with somebody else, would be really intriguing to me. I know people have brought up Justin Falk. They brought up Parayko. If one of those guys would be willing to waive their no trade clause and pair with the Neighbors with the Sabres helping the Blues out with the cap situation, that's home run, because then you just replace Byram in your lineup and you added somebody for a top 6 forward. You have all the cap room in the world. If you're a Sabres fan in that situation, you're like, okay, this is how we get the most complete team possible at this point, because there's not going to be any magical free agent signing to this point that's going to improve things. And it doesn't look like they're really willing to trade anybody else at the moment outside of Byram to try to make something happen. So really that's what you kind of have to hope for if you're a Sabres fan. Somehow you get a top 6 forward and that St. Louis dumps a defenseman that is eating up cap just to create some space.
100%. And I mean, we look at even here for the goal totals last year, the only guy, I mean, Peterka's not on this list. I took him off just because we won't see him next year. But you see, Byram had 7 goals. I think a lot of, concerns fans have are, we see some of these guys at the top of this list. Thompson, 44, he should be a 40-goal guy every year as long as he stays healthy. Tuck at 36, if he can hit that number again, that would be great. But after that, if Zucker can get 20 goals, Norris had 21 last year, McLeod had 20. The Sabres are really banking on these, middle 6 guys to not take any sort of step back in that regard. I think that's why a lot of people have that want for that top 6, us included, is the Sabres have always, not always, but they've had that offseason of, we're going to believe in our guys that they're going to take a big step. And has that really ever happened to, that hasn't happened to a successful level, at least. We're seeing it again this year in a way where that big swing hasn't happened yet. Who knows if it's ever going to happen, Bunty, but we're moving through here. Byram is just, everyone's focused, because outside of that, like, can you see another move the Sabres can make to increase that top six? I know there's, some of those prospects in Rochester, Roseanne, Ostlund, Hellenius, like, for maybe fans who aren't as dialed into what the Sabres have, what outside of Byram can the Sabres get rid of to improve their lineup going into next season?
Well, that really is more dependent on what another team would want and what the Sabres are willing to give up. You look at it, the Sabres have more than enough assets to where they could package guys to make a better deal happen. It's just, are they willing to do that? And it doesn't appear like the Sabres are very anxious to do that. Like, you look if we're looking at the team right now as it stands, like, Quinn would look to be a guy that you could potentially have moved, but doesn't look like there was much interest in a Jack Quinn. And then you signed him as an RFA for 2 years. Before the offseason, people would have asked, would Norris have been a possibility to move on from? But I never really thought that was likely. You go to the minors, guys that are going to be well-regarded are guys like Consta Hellenius. You could maybe talk someone into a Noah Ostlund, but the years of Roseanne being a trade target, like, the guy's getting older now. He's not some 19, 20-year-old kid anymore. You're talking about he has to show that he can play at the NHL level. That's not somebody that teams are going to instantly want to take on as an extra prospect. So there's some guys they can obviously pair up and throw in, but it really just depends on what the Blues would have interest in.
Definitely. And, we can get back to Byram in a second. And I think, we're a couple, I guess, weeks now into the offseason. Obviously, things happened before July 1st, as we can see. The Sabres announced Alex on the line before that official start date. Here's some of the Sabres additions they've had so far. You had the J.J. Peterka deal, bring in Michael Kesselring, Josh Stone. They ship out Connor Clifton, bring in Connor Timmins, and then they sign Justin Danforth for the fourth line and goaltender Alex Lyon. Bunty, now that we're here, granted the offseason's nowhere close to being finished, how would you grade Kevyn Adams' offseason? We're through the draft. They bring in Raheem Murtka in the first round, some fun guys later on. How are you feeling through here on Kevyn Adams' offseason? Is it kind of aligning with what you thought? And, did you want him to do a little bit more?
Yeah, so I don't think it's been a bad offseason if you're just talking about, like, the actual moves and everything they've done, but it's definitely one that doesn't strike me as encouraging going forward. Like if you break down each move that they've made, they've brought in some guys that are going to be helpful, that you could see a purpose for them going forward. But this was an offseason, as were previous offseasons, where I thought the Sabres had to make that big, bold move. And where is it? Like, the only bold move they've made so far is getting rid of one of their top goal scorers, which is a little concerning, because this is supposed to be a year where Adams and Ruff's jobs are supposedly on the line. Their contracts expire after the season. You would think there'd be some ambition to end an NHL record drought, but they can't even go for it in a year when they have nothing to lose. And that's what's kind of concerning to me, which brings up the internal cap situation once again. It's almost impossible to disprove that at this point in time. There's definitely an internal cap going on with this team because they don't spend the money to try to win. And, like, I get it. In the past with Pegula and the earlier years, they did spend money. They did take swings, and they missed on a lot of stuff. And I know the free agent class wasn't the best. And maybe a lot of free agents don't want to even consider Buffalo, and doesn't matter how much money you make. But if you throw some money, at least maybe your name gets mentioned. Like, the Sabres don't even get mentioned in rumors to anybody. The trade talks, nobody wants to waive a no-trade clause to come to Buffalo. We're to the point where even RFAs don't want to come to Buffalo, and they'll say they won't extend if they come to Buffalo. So you're in such a tough situation. But it just doesn't seem like it seems like they're content with having lesser players. And I guess the part I get frustrated with is like you look at the Peterka trade for Kesselring and Don't.
Yeah.
Did they get value back for Peterka? Yeah, they did get value. They needed a second line right-hand defenseman to go with Power. So Kesselring might help Power immensely this year. Is Doan a potential good third liner who could play both sides of the ice and contribute a little bit offensively and then have a good two-way game? Absolutely. But you gave up a 23-year-old that scored 27 goals this past season, 28 the year before, who a team immediately rewards with a $7+ million a year contract. So you got nice return, but that's to be expected. You probably should have gotten a little bit more. You look at Timmins. I like that move. That was solid. You got some analytically. You upgraded by getting Timmins.
I like
Danforth, a high motor, speedy guy for your bottom line. That last year you talked about making games tougher for opponents, and you really didn't follow through with it. Abe Cobell didn't last the season.
Lafferty's gone too.
You're talking about then Lafferty getting traded recently. Mallenstein's the only one that remains. And then Alex Lyon, good backup. Honestly, I think that's actually a pretty under-the-radar, decent move overall for the Sabres. It takes a little bit of the pressure off Devin Levi to step up right away. If he wins the competition, good. That means that he beat a good NHL goalie to make the club. But it's one of those off seasons where if you actually look at like what the Sabres did, they're probably a slightly better team now than what they were a couple weeks ago. But saying slightly better when you had 79 points the year before isn't going to win anybody's approval. And that's the problem I have. How can the message be slight improvements when you haven't made the playoffs in 14 years? You need to sell more than just hope. You need to sell a plan. You need to sell that you're trying, and it doesn't look like they are. Now, we can talk about this a little bit later in the show.
Yeah.
I do think there's some metrics that point the Sabres to being a mid-80s type team that could possibly be even higher. But that's the problem. If the metrics
Fresh said it's going to happen.
If the metrics are saying they're could possibly be a mid-80s team and maybe better, you're saying, yeah, we're going to miss it for 15 straight years. So this trade needs to either get immense value back, or they're just accepting another season of falling short.
Yeah, and I think if you look at this offseason in a bubble, it's fine. It's, they made those slight improvements. They found areas they need to, shore up. But the Sabres aren't going to make the playoffs by solidifying their fourth line. We did that last year. We tried to, reinvent the fourth line, bring in Lafferty, Mallenstein, Abe Kubel, and doing that again, shoring up, the bottom pair defense and, Connor Timmins, who I like. They're making these improvements that aren't super sexy, but are going to help a little bit. But when you look at everything, yes, the drought the past 14 years, but even just the Adams tenure as a whole, as his time as GM, it's, frustrating from the perspective of you want to see those improvements made to let fans know that, that care is there, that jump's going to happen. And I think, we're all online. We see, how fans are, and it makes a lot of sense, because I think a lot of people just want to see that care there, that jump, that not being content with, where they're at. And, the moves that are made aren't the sexiest. But I agree with you, Bunty. They are going to make the Sabres better there. And it's just unfortunate because it feels like the Sabres are doing what they've done in previous years of banking on guys either, continuing, career years they had, or making a big step up without any, chance of regression. And, we're going to see that in Ryan McLeod, who had a career year. Jason Zucker took a big step up this past season. Jordan Greenway was good when he was healthy. And now it's like, okay, we need Zach Benson to make that big jump. Yuri Kulik, we're looking at Sabres mock lines on the first line, and you have Benson and Kulik next to Tage Thompson. It's, okay, I'm going to, imagine this is going to be awesome, great. They're both going to have career years is going to be awesome. But that is not,
like, how are you banking on that?
Yeah, you can't bank on that. And that's why that top six forward is so important, where your top six isn't going to include the names of Yuri Kulik, Zach Benson, Jack Quinn, and Josh Norris, 4 guys that are all basically unproven at the NHL, especially over an 82-game season, of 1, staying healthy, and 2, producing. That's where people are scared, because the only 2 guys in that top 6 right now, if you go with that, is Tage Thompson and Alex Tuck. We got a lot of people here in the comments. So why did that guy go to arbitration? That's just going to be something to figure out. I can't imagine. I mean, they have his rights. Connor Timmins is going to be playing. I'm sure it's something. They're probably just waiting on, I'm imagining, just the Byram deal with, are they going to have to pay him? Are, the guys they bring in, contract stuff? I'm not super concerned on the price of Timmins and what that's going to be. He made 1.1 last season. One more top 6 forward would be amazing. We won't get that low to the crest.
I still think they can get it.
I still think they can too. Exactly.
Here's what probably happens if you do make the trade. You probably get your top 6 forward. Maybe you get your Jake Neighbors. Then you have a hole next to Dahlin on defense, which you probably either then bring up Samuel. You probably put Samuelson with Dahlin, and then who plays next to Timmins on that third pair? That's when you start asking, well, does Ryan Johnson take the leap? Is it Ryan Johnson or is it Bryson? And honestly, they just signed Ryan Johnson to a 3-year extension. And the talk was that he was one of the shutdown guys in the Amerks. How quickly we forget, like, Sabres fans were going to be pissed off if they weren't able to convince Ryan Johnson to sign. Maybe it's finally his time. It feels like it's been forever and that we've all looked past him. But a lot of this Byram potential deal impacts far more than the top 6 forwards. It's also going to impact how this entire defensive unit is going to look.
Yeah, and I think everything is kind of being stalled on this Byram right now, because it's not just they're bringing in someone for their bottom 6 or, rounding out the D-core. It's, okay, who's going to be partnered with Rasmus Dahlin next year, if this deal happens or not, and who's going to be that top 6 forward they bring in for him? Like, this is a big thing and why we're focusing on it so much, why fans care so much about it. And I think we're just at that waiting game right now, unfortunately. Steve Noble, good to see you again here. It's been, I guess, a couple months since last talked to you. Greenway Norris health. That's kind of been the crux of a lot of Sabres issues. Thompson goes out. He played the past couple years injured. You'd see stretches where he didn't look like himself. If he can stay healthy, that's the biggest thing. Granted, every team goes through injuries. Jake Neighbors would be great. And there's, I think, just concern, Bunty, that based on the Sabres offseason right now of, that urgency, it feels like they're the big team, right? Or the biggest thing right now, what's going to happen is the Sabres and Byram. I feel like all those bigger moves have already happened. We're seeing, and reports there's going to be, sporadic trades here and there in the offseason as teams kind of figure things out. But Byram feels like that number 1 target.
Yeah.
Are you concerned that it hasn't happened yet?
A little bit. See, like, this is the thing. Like, people are going to, it's easy to shit on the Sabres. Like, it's very easy. The Sabres don't give themselves any reason to deserve any benefit of the doubt. But at the same point, if you're Kevin Adams and you haven't gotten a good offer, why would you deal him just for the sake of dealing him? That's even worse for your team. So a lot of people, I think the Kyrou rumors are what has messed up a lot of people's thought processes on this. And I think that
was fun for a little bit.
I think a lot is being misreported and misspoken about it. Mm-hmm. I don't believe Kyrou for Byram was ever a possibility at all. If the Sabres had a chance to get Jordan Kyrou for Bo Byram, they would have made the move. Yeah. I think Kyrou was probably brought up in a potential JJ Peterka talk. And who knows if it was serious, if it wasn't, but whatever. But Kyrou was probably talked about regarding Peterka. And then you have a separate talk about Bo Byram. And then Kyrou's name is getting brought up, and everybody thinks, oh, they waited too long until July 1st, and now they ruined it. Oh, typical Kevin Adams. He's an idiot. I'm guessing as soon as Peterka left, Kyrou was no longer likely on the table. And then that's when we've pivoted to Dylan Holloway, Jake Neighbors, and some of these Broberg and some of these other names. Seems like, as I said earlier, that Holloway is going to be too much. That really that sweet spot is probably talking about a guy like Neighbors or Broberg, who would be perfectly fine returns, in my opinion, based on what they did last year. But this is the thing. When Adams was talking about at a couple days after, what was it, maybe a day after free agency, he was talking about trying to get a top 6 forward and a defenseman. So I don't think Adams is looking to just get Neighbors, if that's the case, or if Neighbors is even being presented. I think he's trying to get more. And when you think about the situation, this is the part that really is the interesting thing, intriguing thing to me about all this. Sabres fans, a lot of them are divided on if Byram is good or if he's bad. And the people that don't care about analytics, they look at his point totals, his plus minus, and playing with Dahlin, top line minutes, all that stuff. And they'll be like, he's a good player. Then the metrics people will be like, well, he capitalizes off of Dahlin, and when he's not with Dahlin, he struggles. But they never take into account like he's playing with shitty defensemen when he's not with Dahlin. So that also is a big reason why his numbers drop as much too. But it shows he can't really elevate people like what a top pair defenseman probably should do. But then you factor in the contract, what he wants. He's looking for at least $9 million a year, and he's looking to be a top pair defenseman. And in this open market, he might get $7-8 million. Now in arbitration, it's probably closer to $6.5 million on a short-term deal.
Because he wants 2 years, they'll get him to UFA.
Yeah, so if Byram is what he thinks he is, and that's a $9 million top pair defenseman, well, then it's honestly crazy for a team like St. Louis to think, let's just get like a low-level like player and a high prospect. Like, that's ridiculous. If Byram is truly a $9 million a year guy, top pair defenseman, and say St. Louis is going to give him a $9 million a year contract for like 4 or 5 years or whatever it is, it has to be Neighbors and somebody else in that scenario. But this is where the disconnect. Everybody looks at the metrics and they say, well, he's not that good. Well, if he's not that good, then why do 7 or 8 teams have interest in him? And it's because they do think that he has that ability to be that good. It's just a lot of them are just associating him with the Sabres and basically saying maybe he's just putting up weird numbers because he's in Buffalo, and if he's in our system, he'll be good. But you can't just lowball the Sabres if you believe that. Like, Evan Adams would be ridiculous to just give him away for nothing. So you're in this situation where if you're Kevin Adams and you're a Sabres, until you get that offer that you want, just take what the arbitration says and play him with Dahlin in whatever. If he's unhappy, he's unhappy. But you're probably going to save a lot of money in that scenario, which helps the internal cap. And then at the same point, if he plays great, you can trade him some point during the regular season. Maybe you're winning, and then he doesn't want to leave. Who knows? Like, there's a lot of different factors. 2 years is a lot of time. And I don't think, as much as we want something to happen right away, and I do, I don't think playing the long game is necessarily the worst approach. And people saying, well, he could walk into free agency. The Sabres, if he could trade him at any point the next 2 years.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people in the chat talking about, Shane Wright, Capo Caco in Seattle. That's another kind of team that's been floated out there. Those two guys, on the younger side, they haven't put up those same numbers that we've seen in Holloway and Neighbors a little bit. But, those two guys kind of scare me too, of just that consistent production in the NHL. The Sabres, I feel like, have a plethora of guys that kind of fit that role. And like Joey too, I saw you in here somewhere. Here you are. Just in terms of like the Peterka deal, I think that's why we're seeing this delays, because Kevin Adams, Peterka was the number one trade target, on Frank Saravelli's board. There's a lot of talk on all these teams that were interested, but the Sabres, what they wanted back, it's hard to get from a team if you're trading a young top 6 forward to get one back. So the Sabres move here, we've talked about it in length of Kesselring and Doan is the sexiest. I think it's going to turn out really well. And now the Sabres have this glaring hole of that top 6 forward. Now they need to try to fill that in some capacity. And they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit with the way these trades went down. I know I was under the assumption that this Byram deal is going to be set in stone, happened before the Peterka one, that, if one of those two trades is going to happen, it's going to be the Byram deal. But we're still waiting on that. Just kind of popping through some more comments here. Bunty, I like what you talked to of like, Byram, when he was with Dahlin, was good, serviceable. If it's Byram plus, I mean, we have guys there. There's a log jam of forwards. Are you going to hang on to them forever? That's kind of, I guess, the big question mark now. So we'll see what happens in arbitration for Bowen Byram, what that's going to look like for the Sabres. But yeah, I think the Sabres lineup, I saw someone comment as well. What's that going to look like without Byram? We're in such a great spot that you could throw literally anybody with Rasmus Dahlin and they're going to have a career year. So even someone weird like a Connor Timmins, who was great in Pittsburgh when he joined them, let me pull up some stuff here on Timmins, but his point production in Pittsburgh once he moved there went through the roof. I think he'd be a great addition to Dahlin possibly if they move on from Byram, where they can go well together. I think that second pair is set in stone. Power, Kesselring, we got the D partner for Owen Power. Then you have Samuelson, you got Bryson, Johnson. Hopefully they can bring in someone else to kind of fill that void a little bit more on the third pair. That's not the biggest deal in the world to me, Bunty. But I guess we're going through a couple more comments. Steve Noble. So he's going to arbitration. But so try Doan, Tatum preseason. I like Josh Doan. I think is going to be such a fun addition to this team. He's a guy I've been talking about online. I think you can see him throughout the lineup to fill plug holes when need be. There's going to be injuries to go from there. But Bunty, we've talked about Byram, what's going to happen there. Kevin Adams offseason. There's a couple question marks on this team right now on guys who might have to prove it this year that, they've maybe given some pieces, given another chance. Do you have a guy on this roster that you're going to look at closely, like, okay, this is going to be your kind of last shot at this big role, either on this team, in this position, kind of going into next season?
I mean, if you're saying last shot in this role, like that's Jack Quinn.
100%, yeah.
He's the only guy I could say last shot to. There's
or just even a mindset of, maybe this guy isn't what I thought. A lot of
players I'm intrigued by on the Sabres this year. So, like, I'm intrigued by Zach Benson and Yuri Kulik. What are they going to bring to the table? Everybody talks about you lose Peterka. How do you replace his goal scoring? And they ignore the fact that the Sabres were 10th in the NHL in goal scoring last year. The problem for the Sabres wasn't putting the puck in the back of the net. It was holding on to leads. It was keeping the puck out of their own net. And we had a segment where during draft night, we were talking about the Sabres need to start doing the right things. Yes. And that's playing hockey a certain way that leads to better results. And so many fans are fixated on the stats and certain things. I want players that play hockey smart. So when I look at what they've put together right now, I believe their forward group and their defense group has guys that are going to be a little bit more defensively responsible, which will help them out in their own zone. But how much is that going to impact their offensive production? Did they lose a ton of offensive production? At the end of the day, the only thing you've lost right now is really JJ Peterka. Yep. And then defensively, you're essentially the same as what you were before. You lost Connor Clifton, big like whoop-de-doo. So I hear people saying, like, this team is getting so much worse. And I don't really get that point of view. I made a post about they look like an 80 to a 90-point team. If they struggle, they'll be around 80. If they do well, they'll be around 90. And people are like more like 70 to 80. I don't quite get some of this. The Sabres have averaged 85 points a year the last 3 years. Now they're going in the wrong direction. They went from 91 to 84 to 79. But they had 79 points last year with a 13-game losing streak factor, which is like crazy. And people are like, well, they always have something like that. Not the year before when they had 84 points. They didn't have like a winning streak or a losing streak more than like 3 or 4 games the entire season. And then the 91-point season, they obviously had a lot of ups and downs like a roller coaster. I think what's intriguing to me is people are like, how are they going to pick up that production that they lost from Peterka? And then I keep thinking to myself, well, you have a guy by the name of Josh Norris who played 3 games for you last year that had a 30-goal season in the past.
2 points.
And then people are saying, well, he's never healthy. I am not one of these guys that says just because you've been hurt a few times in the past, you're going to be hurt the rest of your career. And I know there's some analytics guys that keep pointing out, oh, he's never healthy. Sometimes injuries are luck. Like in anybody that played sports, sometimes it's just luck. And if all the injuries are connected to each other, like the same things keep happening, okay, then I'd be like, okay, you're probably broken. But from all of what's been reported, what Norris had happened to him in Buffalo last year was unrelated due to the previous longer injuries. So Byram had concussion issues until he played 82 games in the Buffalo last year. So I'm tired of some of these, like, oh, he's never going to play. Watch Norris play 70 games next year, score 30 goals, and then we're going to be laughing about all that talk. So who knows? I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but I think Norris can make up some of the production. Then you look at Quinn. He was coming off an Achilles injury the year before, and as we've seen with football players, that obviously has an impact on your game. And his rookie year, he had 14 goals and 37 points. Last year, 15 goals and 39 points. Needs to improve defensively, but who's to say Quinn can't take a step up and be a 20-goal, 45, 50-point player with better line mates? Who's to say that Benson can't make a jump from around 30 points to 40 points? Kulich is going to be playing on the power play. He already showed goal scoring potential. Who's to say Kulich can't be a 20-goal scorer in Buffalo this upcoming year? And I know a lot of this is all based on hope and can guys step up, but this feels like a different hope than what was going on with Cousins, Peterka, and Quinn. With Cousins and Peterka and Quinn, it was these guys are 21, 22, 23 years old, and we're going to instantly give them second-line minutes. No accountability for defensive lapses, stupid plays, stupid turnovers. We're going to give these guys contract. Well, not contract, but with Cousins' point of view, a contract. We're going to give these guys more power than what anybody should have at that age, and we're going to rely on them. And they weren't ready for that responsibility, and it killed them. They should have been guys with better veteran line mates or playing on the third line. They rushed them. I don't think they're depending on Benson and Kulich to be what the kid line was. If you're pairing Kulich with Thompson, you're pairing a youngster with the best player on your team in the hopes that the best player in your team is going to elevate him and get a level of production. The same thing with Benson. Cousins, Quinn, Peterka, what's one thing they all have in common? None of them play defense. None of them play defense. We don't have that issue with Benson. So even if Benson's struggling to put the points on the board and the puck in the back of the net, you know he's going to be going to do the tough things to help out his teammates either way. Like, he's going to go in the corner on the forecheck. He's going to make responsible plays. He's going to help you in your own zone. So Benson, I don't really feel that whole, well, he's going to hurt you on the ice. Kulich, I think they're going to give him a line mate that's going to help him out at times. And then Quinn, he's the guy where you really say, well, prove it to me, or else you're not playing in the Sabres in a few years from now, and you're going to be considered a bust, and you're never going to make good money. So I know people are saying, like, it feels like it's a youth movement all over again. This feels like a little bit different youth movement. And then you look defensively by giving Power Kesselring, by adding Timmins, you really have shored up overall, like, better metric guys on your defense. And then even at goalie, like, do I love hoping UPL takes a step back counting in that? No, I don't love it. But is it Alex Lyon?
Yeah.
Even with Alex Lyon, like, not great, but better than anything that Devin Levi's been the last 3 years. Yeah. And what was the problem with Reimer? We saw Reimer at the end of the year. You have a goalie like that in net, you can actually win some games with an average goalie. The Sabres haven't had much of that. They've had Craig Anderson. They've had these older goalies that show it for small sample sizes, but you can't roll with them. Alex Lyon is young enough. He could play 40-plus games. If UPL just comes out of the gate and stinks, Alex Lyon could be your starting goalie if you need it to be.
He got Florida all the way through 2 years ago. He carried kind of that team into the postseason. So
I look at it like this. Realistically, if you ask me, where is this team right now? I'm saying 85 points. Now, if you get Jake Neighbors and Justin Falk, maybe I'm turning that to like 88 points. Maybe I go to 89 points, and I get myself to like feel that way. Now, they could still be 79 points. They could still be 80 points. They could still be awful. But a lot of people dismiss this, but they were on a 91-point pace the first 20-plus games of the season. go on a 13-game losing streak, and then the last half of the season they were on a 90-point pace. Now I know there's no expectations the last half of the season, but those are large sample sizes. What is the outlier there? The 13-game losing streak. So it's so easy to kill this club, but when you talk about how do you make up for JJ Peterka's scoring, when you talk about could they find something, it's not completely crazy to expect this group of guys to be better than what we think. And after 2 years of underperforming expectations, normally things flip eventually, and then you have a season where you overperform expectations. And head coaches, good ones, typically it's that second or that third year where you might see that leap. Lindy Ruff once had a leap in New Jersey. I think it was from year 2 to year 3, where they gained 49 points from the previous year with a similar roster. Yeah, I do believe this team is going to be better than what people think. I'm not picking them to make the playoffs. I learned my lesson from last year, but I'm not. Don't count me in the group of let's just kill this team. I'm more in the group of this team has some young talent. Give them a chance to go for it, and that's where I get disappointed because I don't see them striving to be great. I see them content with accepting the mediocrity that they are, and then pointing to it as we're young. Like you could be young and good. Like this team is talented enough to be young and good, but they don't take that shot.
Yeah, and I'm going to go through a lot of the comments tonight. Thank you to the almost 3,000 people here on a Crossing Swords Monday, of all things, in the middle of the offseason, July. One of the names that keep popping up, Tyson Kozak. That's a name that I love from last year. A guy that, isn't really slotted in the Sabres lineup right now in terms of like mock lineups and stuff. I think he should be there. I think everything he did last year kind of proved that he's kind of in that Josh Stone mindset for me that, Steve's talking about. I'm just like that Lindy Ruff DNA from the local evening news here. Bunty, you talked about it last time of a lot of the moves they've made are to bring in Lindy Ruff, guys that kind of play that style, and to move on from guys that really don't play that style. Peterka's gone, a couple of the other moves that they made. And I see a lot of the moves the Sabres have made this offseason are going all in on, this style of hockey, focusing on that two-way side of the game. They moved on from the kids line really of being that secondary scoring, even driving the Sabres offense to, Jack Quinn being the only guy here. And his spot in the lineup is basically up in the air if he's even going to have a spot if they make that move.
That's
great.
Has that
yes,
pressure
100%.
on him. Like we heard stories late last year that Jack Quinn was showing up to practices late in Minnesota where he had to be a healthy scratch. How is that acceptable? You're the worst player on the damn team, and you're showing up late for practice as a young player who doesn't even have a long-term contract yet. Like that amazed me when I heard that about Jack Quinn. And I'll be real, like you kept hearing Lindy refer about culture issues. Mm-hmm. I hate to say, like, it was Cousins. It was Peterka. It was, I think, Samuelson. Dahlin was so enamored with Jason Zucker last year and how he was changing things on the team. And then, like, I don't want to be like, I don't want to say it's all like Cousins and Peterka, but like Cousins leaves the team. And then the team like starts going on a little bit of a roll. Like,
post-trade.
The thing that's been consistent with Lindy Ruff in the later stage of his career, minus like Dominic Hasek and like Ryan Miller, like in that, is that his teams have consistently been good at generating offense and scoring goals, but they've had horrible goaltending and they've struggled keeping the puck out of their net. And you look at last year, the Sabres, 10th in goals, but I think 29th or 30th in goals allowed. So that's kind of like right on cue for what this Lindy's MO has been of late. But that's why I think there's been such an emphasis on getting better more defensively responsible players. Because I do believe Lindy thinks if we can just get slightly better, not slightly better, that's not enough. If we can take a stride, a large stride defensively, maybe our goal scoring goes down a little bit, but like we make a big enough improvement defensively, that could be worth 2, 3, 4 wins just there alone. So I don't know. It sucks grasping at straws, but it does feel like having a more responsible two-way game is the way to go. And I don't want to kill Don Granato because I think at that time expectations were so low. He was just doing whatever he needed to do to develop these kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the dangers of telling young players do whatever you want in order to learn from your mistakes and you'll get better as a result is you also sometimes have the ability to develop bad habits.
Yep.
And you don't always get out of them. And we saw Dylan Cousins peak early. We saw a lot of these other players have high level seasons early, but what have they done since when they've been asked to do other things? They haven't been able to show it. So I think in some ways Granato was the right coach for maximizing what they could early in their development, but these players have shown they're limited when it shows to what they can actually do in their games. And that's what I don't it's so tough because like Kruger was right before Granato and Kruger was the exact opposite where he's killing his players' potential by not putting them in situations to succeed, not letting them play freely. So it's like I need some middle ground. I need some more of like we have a system in place. We got to play close to within the system. I'll give you some flexibility like this way, that way, like depending on what your skill level is, what your role is. But like we can't just have guys playing loosey-goosey, but you can't just have this whole tight-knit group. It's finding that middle ground, and it's tough because like you think of how many blown leads the Sabres had last year. How many times 2-goal lead in the second period, stupid turnover, leads to odd man break, and then odd man rush, and then next thing you know, it's a 1-goal game, and then they blow it in a period later. I do think they need some more discipline. I do think they need more playing within the system. I think good teams, they know how to play as a team. And I don't think the Sabres have a lot of players that play within the team structure very well.
And I think that's the reason, at least speaking for myself, Bunty, why, it's not just a hope and pray that guys are going to take a step in their progression next year. I think a lot of the issues we've seen in guys is, they've had skill, but they haven't had maybe the stuff off the ice or, systems wise, they weren't as good as they should be or didn't focus on it. And I think this year we're going to see that improvement get there. I thought Yuri Kulik was great in that Sabre system. He's a young kid. You throw him on the first line, playing next to Tage Thompson, Zach Benson for a bit. They had Peterka there. They kind of rotated guys in that left spot. But he was a guy that I thought played surprisingly well at both ends of the ice as a first-line center, young kid that's going to take that step. I saw a couple of comments here too of just, Jack Quinn improved after Cousins left. Steve Noble, like he's a guy that I think his last 14, 15 games was a point per game. He had that good stretch of like 9 points in 5 games. This could be a thing too where we see guys, in that prove it year. UPL, another example, 2 years ago, he wasn't the starter. He was the third goalie to start the year. He had Levi and Anderson, and then UPL. He had that mercy, took the reins and was gone. Last year was his net, took that step back. This year, I think he improved defensively as well. That's going to help him out. And you're going to see that progression take place. And I think too, like Richard, appreciate you commented all night too. Like, their own zone. I mean, the Gatesy, Winmore, lots more diehard fans at home would be sick of me talking about. The Sabres were bad, especially to start the year there. Like Bunty, I'm sure you remember those conversations online of like every single game was like Owen Power cannot tie up in front of the net. They had the press conference. It was either him. I think it might have been one of the coaches that said, he was never taught how to tie up in front of the net being in the NHL, which is crazy. We saw him improve a lot defensively last year. I think that step is going to be there next year. You add Michael Kesselring alongside him. This team is going to improve in not a lot of sexy areas, but areas that are going to help this team win games in the long run. Do you have any kind of final thoughts on, that stuff, any other like Byram stuff, on the back of your mind that you think are going to really help the Sabres, in this offseason and also going into next year?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what we say about the Sabres in the
Yep.
middle of July. They have to go out and prove it. They know that everyone thinks they're not good and that they're going to have another year where they miss the playoffs and that they're full of bottom line guys. And this isn't to pick on this point here where Joseph says because the Sabres are full of third and fourth liners.
Shout out Joseph for being here too.
That's just not true. Like, and that's something that I get bothered by when I hear people talk about the Sabres. If all the Sabres players are third and fourth liners, you wouldn't hear about them being successful when they go on other teams. They're not all bottom liners. They're not all bad. That's why this
different eras too of that. Yeah. I think Eichel, Reinhart, O'Reilly.
Like that was a weak team. Like that was a top heavy team. These teams are not as bottom weak as what those teams were. Like those teams were basically Eichel, Reinhart, and then you would throw in a couple players that they traded for, like O'Reilly or Kane and Skinner, like random guys like that, and then Taylor Hall later on. But this Sabres team, see, like this is what I struggle with. Tage Thompson is one of the best goal scorers in the entire NHL. No one's telling me he's a third liner, like, or that he's not a top liner. Tage Thompson could score 50+ goals if he was on a good enough team. Like Tage Thompson could score 50 to 60, in my opinion. Like he has that type of ability. Rasmus Dahlin is a top 5 defenseman in the NHL. And honestly, if he was on a better team, Dahlin could be what any of these top defensemen are in the NHL. You could mention him next to Makar and all the other ones. If you put Dahlin on a team like Vegas, or you put him on a team like Florida, Dahlin would be an 80+ point guy, no doubt about it. Tuck, you're talking about a guy that now has 2 seasons where I think he scored over 35 goals. He's classic power forward type game, gritty,
and score too.
Like Tuck is a great, like those are 3 very good players on any team in the NHL. Tuck and where you go Zucker, McLeod, that's where you get more interesting. Like those guys probably are third liners, but they're middle 6. You can move them from second line, third line. And if you want to say they're third line, fine. They're really good third liners if you want to call them third liners. Then you go to even further down the line. Like Norris is not a third liner. Norris is a second liner as well. Now, he probably shouldn't be a first line center, but he's a good second line player. Quinn, he's probably a third liner, but there's that potential. Benson has that potential. Kulik has that potential. So there's a lot that goes into it. And then when you look at guys, the bottom of the lineup, like Greenway might be on the 4th line this year.
I have him on my 4th line right now.
And that would be a very good guy to have on your 4th line. We all make fun of Peyton Krebs for early in his career, trying to be tough, but he's actually like turned into a nice 4th line center, like a guy that has his little niche spot. And you look at what Doan can potentially turn into, like that would be a good third liner as well. So I don't want to like be this person, but I can see the talent on a team. Owen Power as your second pair defenseman, like that's a guy that could be one of the best defensemen in the NHL in a couple years. Kesselring is a good mid-pair guy. So,
and he's a guy that put up 40 points, not on the first power play unit as a defenseman. And when he was 23 last season, 24.
And again, Joseph, not meaning to like pick on your tweets. I appreciate the interaction, and you're right. They don't have the complete pieces to do what they need to do. But to say they don't have the pieces without some context is kind of misleading. They have relied on young players that they shouldn't have relied on, that they gave too much the benefit of the doubt early in their careers with Cousins, Peterka, and Quinn. And when you put a bunch of 21, 22, 23-year-olds on your second line with no help, you're not going to get good results. They were outmatched and they didn't step up, and they often were non-existent. The reason I feel differently about this team is they are trying to be more defensively responsible, which is another way of winning games. And I do think they're trying to take that leap. And if we're being real, when have the Sabres, even when the Sabres were good, when did they have expectations? The year they went to the Cup, they were I think the 7 or 8 seed in the playoffs. The year that they went to the Eastern Conference Finals against Carolina and took it to Game 7, they were projected to finish last in the NHL that year. So
and those teams too, Bunty, like they were just a collection of like players that played very well. That were great players, but they didn't have,
yeah. That's what
crazy
I think.
Superstars.
See, that's the thing they're trying to do now.
Yes.
Which it's hard to do it when you've missed it for 14 straight years. Like if they just missed the playoffs for a year or two, like you give them more benefit of the doubt.
Of course.
They're trying to buy into the team concept.
Yeah.
And they're basically telling you by these recent moves, our team was selfish. Our team was young and inexperienced. And we are trying to build a team. We're trying to build a culture. And you can laugh off some of the culture stuff. I do think like culture only gets you so far and talent only gets you so far. You need a combination of both. But what they've been doing the previous 10 plus years wasn't working. So why are we going to keep trying to just keep getting all these high draft picks and just win with skill? If anything, what they're trying to show is we're trying to get a different balance of players. We're trying to get a different team makeup. And like you look at like I look at this right here. I'll just run through this quick with the goal scorers. Thompson, goal scorer. Tuck, power forward, can score goals, can do the gritty stuff. Zucker, one of the few guys on the team that will go in front of the net to actually deflect a shot or screen a goalie. McLeod, speedy, but amazing defensively, able to clear his own zone, but also added offensive touch when he got the opportunity. Darlene, all-world defenseman. Quinn, sniper. He's going to be liability defensively. But you know what? Where Quinn works? Where he doesn't get paired with 2 other defensive liabilities on his line. Where now maybe he doesn't have to worry about every little mistake he makes. Like you go Kulik, sniper, slap shot, amazing shot. Krebs, gritty, bottom line guy, plays the right way. Benson plays the right way already.
And his first goal is in between his legs.
Like Benson could be a second or first line one day. And then power, like all the ability in the world. So like, let's not confuse losing with everybody sucks. Like they don't all suck. They have to figure things out. And it's annoying. It's frustrating. Yeah. But what I'm seeing this offseason, I'm not saying like this is the funny thing too. Everybody's acting like they got much better. The metrics say, got much worse. I mean, the metrics say they've actually gotten better. So
I agree with that.
Is take that next step, figure it out, and who knows? Maybe they get 68 points this year and they suck, and I'm cursing this team in the middle of October. But I am definitely not as low as everyone else is on Sabres Twitter, but I'm also not going to be like, oh, they're making the playoffs. Like I am not in that group. I just think with this team, we need a little bit more. I guess being realistic with them. And normally when you say be realistic, you're saying that because people are way too positive, like, oh, the Bills are going to go be a dynasty and win 4 straight Super Bowls. With the Sabres, being realistic is telling people they're not good, but they're a little bit better than what you think. And you're right, Joseph. I will be cursing them because I'm a hockey fan. Yeah. And that's what hockey fans do. I am going to be cursing them. I have no doubt I'm going to be pissed off at them at some point.
Hot take. I'm not going 82-0 this year.
Yeah. I'm gonna they're
gonna have bad games.
If they're losing 3-0 in the third period of the first game of the year at home, I'm gonna be pissed. But at the same point, let's not act like we didn't see some small strides late in the season. Yeah. And everybody's just acting like, oh, that's just a fluke, doesn't mean anything. Or they made some moves, they figured a few things out, and now they know what they're going for.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Bunty, I think we're both on the same page throughout all this, and a lot of it makes sense.
I agree with that.
Joseph, 100%. That's something that's always just been that we just want that consistency and that improvement to be there. Like we've all seen these young guys show flashes of being great players, and then they'll be missing for 7, 8, 9, 10 games. The Sabres can't afford to have that anymore with their younger guys. And I like what, Steve's been talking about, local evening news. All the people on YouTube have really been talking about the Sabres haven't been letting their young guys develop in Rochester. You look at the previous Lindy Ruff teams here in Buffalo that were good. Those guys played in Rochester a long time together before they went to the NHL. Granted, it's different now than it was then in terms of player development, but we are seeing that with Roseanne, Oslin, Hellenius. They're just going to keep them there. So if they don't make that move when Zucker's deal is up, when Greenway's deal is up, maybe they're at that position. They can take that spot, on that third line for the Sabres or whatever that is. They're going to get there. I saw a comment here from Maxwell on, we talked about a little bit on who plays with Dahlin when Byram is traded. That's a great luxury the Sabres have, is basically whoever they throw with Rasmus Dahlin, they play so much better than without him for the most part. I don't want it to be Samuelson. They could throw him there. I'm kind of hoping Connor Timmins. I think that could be fun. He played great with Pittsburgh last year when given the opportunity. And Pittsburgh's a team that's really built on analytics as well. So I think there's a lot of things that can happen there. The 13-game losing skid was just 6 games. Yeah, that's the thing they need to get rid of. They can't have those stretches, Bunty.
Gatesy, they win 4 of those games. That's 8 more points. And you finish at 87 points. You miss the playoffs by like a game or two. So that 13-game losing streak really, really changes the perspective of the team. Because if we're being real, what the Sabres were bad last year, but they weren't that level of bad. They were competitive most nights. Even early in that losing streak, they were competitive and they let a few go away. It all fell apart the night Dahlin gets hurt and misses the third period, and they blow a 4-0 lead and lose in regulation. And if we're also being real, check out the Sabres record without Dahlin in the lineup. It's something like 0-7-1. Say you have Dahlin in those games and you win 4 of them. Like you're right in it. And that's the thing. People, I know we get looked at as like the positive Sabres podcast, and I get it because I do give them like the benefit of the doubt on a few things. But it's not because I want to say the Sabres are great, they're going places. Look Obviously. Out. But we're so toxic as a fan base right now that there sometimes are small metric things that you can point to and say, that makes a difference. That makes a difference. This makes a difference. And when you see a team go on a 13-game losing streak, and people will say, well, the Sabres are just going to go on a big losing streak every year. But then you realize your star all-world defenseman missed 8 of those games, and what their record is with him in the lineup versus what their record is with him out of the lineup, then you're like, oh, that makes sense. Things snowballed. Things got out of control. You have a young team where you're relying on young players who aren't accountable, aren't ready to face the burden, take the burden of all this, and nobody is doing what's needed to get themselves out of it until it's too late and everything's destroyed. I look back at that and I just keep thinking that is when Lindy Ruff knew this team needed changes, because you would see it he saw it every day. We don't see what's going on in practice. We don't see what these players are doing when they're late at night, if they're home in a family setting or out partying. I'm not trying to I'm not alluding to anybody particular, but
of course
there's things they see that management and coaching sees. And a lot of people now, the talk is going to be, are the Sabres going to waste Dahlin and Tage, and are they going to want out? And I'm afraid of that being a real possibility if they have another horrible season, and that would suck. And I hope we don't get to that point. But at some point too, even if they do want out, the Sabres are going to have to play hardball at some point and be like, tough luck. We're not trading you, Rasmus Dahlin. I'll be real. If I was running the Sabres, I don't know if I would have traded Jack Eichel.
Oh,
I might have just been like, you know what? I know you want out. What are you going to do? You going to hold out?
It's a crazy what if. You're
going to hold out? You're not going to play anymore? The same thing. If Dahlin ever said I want out, I'll be like, sorry. No.
I'm chaining myself to the KeyBank Center.
You don't want to play anymore? You're not going to play. You're going to hold out? Okay.
Well, I think that might be the difference too. I'm telling myself, Bunty, between this core and that core of, the late, 2018 to 2020, that group there, the Reinhart, Eichel, O'Reilly's. I'm just telling myself that, not to saying the other group didn't, but this group, they want to be the ones that end the drought. You hear the things Dahlin says, that Thompson says, that, there's more core guys say they're leaning on guys like Zucker, these veteran guys that have been there, done that. Like, I'm telling myself, I'm believing it, that they're going to do what they can to be that change, because you look at a guy like Dahlin, who's been here since 2018. He's really like the only guy that's been here that knows what Buffalo's like when the Bills were starting to get to that next level, how the city rallied around them from going on that 17-year playoff drought. Like, I really, truly believe that, that's something that is there in that room of wanting to be that change.
100%. And the thing too is, like, I'm not saying this like to punish Dahlin. Like, obviously there's this thought, if you're outspoken, you're verbal, and you're annoying, you'll get what you want, because nobody wants a cancer on their team.
True.
I don't know if Dahlin is that type of guy where he's going to put a public display and whine and be a crybaby. And this is where I'm at. Your team hasn't made the playoffs in 14 years. The whole thing with Eichel, it got beyond fixing. He wanted out, and then he came back for another year, and then he got hurt, and then you don't give him the surgery. And what were you going to do at that point? There was a lot of risk and stuff involved. Dahlin, like, as much as, like, I hate to say this, but, like, I feel like he'd be more proper in handling himself. And maybe even if he did want out, the fact of it is, we've learned over the years, you're not going to get your value back. You're not going to get your value back. You're going to get draft picks. You're going to get other prospects. You're going to get other things that are not guaranteed to make you considerably better. You got to just hold on. Like, I know fans are afraid of Dahlin and Thompson. What's going to happen? If I'm the Sabres, I'm playing hardball. They both signed 8-year contracts.
Yeah,
like
100%.
They're my future. I'm not getting rid of either of them in the next 2 years. They like, minimum, both of them are on the team the next 2 years if I'm the one running the organization. I don't even care. Like, if he wants to go back and play hockey in Sweden, go play in Sweden. Like, have your hockey career be irrelevant in North America, and that for all I care.
Yeah, I'm not even going to imagine that.
I love Dahlin. I'm not saying this. Like, I'm not saying Dahlin would ever do this. This is all
number one Dahlin hater, Mike Bundt.
No, I love Rasmus Dahlin. So I hope nobody actually is like saying like this as like I like type of situation with Dahlin. I hope it never gets there. But the point of it being, like, the Sabres have to stop being that team that's accommodating to every player's wants and hopes. Like, you get Reinhart in a great situation in Florida. You get Eichel in a great situation in Vegas. You let Okposo go to a great situation in Florida. I'm tired of seeing former Sabres win cups and then mocking the team and laughing at the organization. You know what? I don't care. Like, I know there's a thought process back in the day. Well, if we treat our players well by trading them to other situations where they can have success and be happy, that's going to help our reputation across the league. Well, you know what? It hasn't. It hasn't meant shit. You know what? Next time you have a star, like, I was going to joke, like, send Peterka to Utah. Well, they did send Peterka to Utah. Yeah. Like, you know what? I would rather see Jack Eichel than in Vegas. I would love to see Jack Eichel playing in, like, some crappy, like, random city. Like, I don't know. Name one. Like, it'd be great to see Eichel anywhere other than Vegas at the current time. Like Ottawa, like Jack Eichel in Ottawa would be funny to me. I know Ottawa like just had a good season, but like sending him there would have been great. Like sending Reinhart to like the New York Islanders would have been great. Like sending them to these other destinations where like they're miserable. So I don't know. I'm just having a good time right now. But.
Yeah, and it's a good point too. Of I mean, that's just kind of been the nature of things, and I do believe that what we saw in that previous core blowing up, being sent places, having that success is the total opposite of what we're seeing now. We see guys like Middlestat be moved, Cousins, and all talk is, oh, they're going to have career years. They're going to do all these great things. They're going to win the cup right after. They haven't taken that step. I do believe that the players they're moving on from now are for different reasons than they're moving on from the O'Reillys, the Eichels, the Reinhardts. 100%. It's a totally different situation. And the thing that kills the Sabres the most in terms of just, talk and vibes is everything that's happened the past 2 decades. I mean, you go back to Drew and Bear, all that stuff.
Is the same.
But if you put your blinders on, you look at it in a bubble, and just it's tough. Like we watched this team 82 games a night a year over the past 14 years have been nothing but heartbreak. Some fun moments in there, obviously, but it's hard to not look at it in a bubble. But when you look at it this year, you look at the additions, the little improvements there. Yes, we want that top six forward in, but like we said, those improvements are there that they're going to be better than they were last year. The offseason is not done yet. There's still, things that can happen. The Byram deal is obviously first and foremost. Maxwell asking the hard-hitting questions. Folks at home, the over 4,000 people that have tuned in tonight to the Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs Gaming Hotel. How would you want to see the goalies getting broken down in terms of games played? I can hop in first if you want to think a little bit. My number one thing is,
but you go ahead first.
If UPL doesn't hit 40 games, like that is major red flags, like concern of the wheels have fallen off of Luukkonen. I want him to take the reins and run like he did. I want Alex Lyon. He's 32. He's not Craig Anderson, who was like 60 years old when he was playing here. But I wanted the focus to be on Luukkonen to get those games in, to take the net back. Because if they don't, there's a ton of question marks about this season. If Luukkonen, the season he had 2 years ago, I don't think those numbers are an insane loft after what he did last year. Those changes have to be made to his game that we've talked about extensively, just slowing things down, not being as aggressive. But if he can just be better than he was last year, get to 40 games, stay healthy, knock on wood, and just take the net back. That's all I want. I mean, if Levi, he's not really in my thought process of games. If Levi's getting a lot of games, I'm concerned. That means we have an injury or the wheels have fallen off in Buffalo. What do you think, Bunty?
Yeah, so if we just did a even split for just the two, not factoring in Levi playing, I would want something like a 46-36, where UPL has the 46, Lyon has the 36. Yeah, realistically, we know there's going to be moments where they're going to have somebody calling up. Yep. So I'll say like a 44, 34-6 might be where I'm at. Here's the thing. I just can't have, unless UPL goes on a tear, I have no faith that he's going to be the right guy to play 50-plus games. So I don't trust him enough. But 46 games and 36 for Lyon tells me, okay, Lyon gets hot at some point in the year. You give him some run. But here's the other part. We heard stuff about UPL being sensitive about Reimer getting the run late in the season. And what does that tell me? That can tell me a lot of different things depending on perspective with UPL. That could tell me UPL is a competitor, that he doesn't like giving up the net to another goalie. But that could also tell me that UPL is a baby and doesn't like having another person outperform him, get his due recognition in the net. I'll put it like this. UPL is paid to be the starter right now. Lyon is paid to be the backup. But the Sabres are not in a position where they can just give that net to either person. UPL is going to start the year as a starter. They're going to give him the opportunity. If he has an 880 save percentage after 7 starts, you give Lyon the chance to win over the job. And if Lyon impresses, you run with him for as long as you want to run with him and tell UPL, sorry, man, we've given you countless seasons to prove yourself, and you're not getting it done. You need to step up, or else you're not going to be getting the net. So my thing is give UPL the advantage in the year with the plan of maybe a 55, 45, 60, 40 type share. And then if he gives you a reason to turn on that and Lyon takes advantage of his opportunity, well, then you could flip it.
Yeah, I agree 100% there. I mean, it's Luukkonen's net to lose. We talked earlier, this best year, he had overcome that adversity. He might be a guy that just needs that chip on his shoulder to get to that next level. I agree with Joseph here too. The Sabres being better defensively is going to help out UPL, where, even just from the goaltender's perspective of he's super aggressive, got crazy, because the Sabres were giving up a lot of good chances at times. They can bring that in. He can rein it in a bit more. The Sabres should be a better team. Yeah, there's a lot of people talking tonight in the comments. Appreciate everyone here with the Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs Gaming Hotel. Shout out to them. Keeping the show running, Bunty. This is fun doing this. We're going to try to do this more often as the season goes on. Folks at home, probably, through the offseason, maybe every other week, big news happens, a Byram deal. It'd have been cool if it happened tonight, Kevin. That would have been nice. Could have done something live.
Well, what's going to happen? Now we're going to have to, if something does happen this week, then we're going to have another emergency Byram, and then we're going to be on air all the time. But
Joseph, I need you to be ready 24/7 for the notification. I need you in here.
I hear you, man. And I just got to shout out the fan positivity on here is Kevin Adams therapy. You know what? Maybe it is therapy for Kevin Adams. And if it is, like, that's fine. Picking a team to have 85 points is fan positivity and living in Saberland, then, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to tell you, because, like, 85 points ain't that positive. 85 points is just picking them to finish what they've averaged with the last
do the same thing
3 seasons. Like this is the crazy thing. I'll end it with this.
Yeah.
Gatesy. 3 seasons ago, the Sabres had 91 points. 85 points would have been 6 points below that. 2 seasons ago, the Sabres had 84 points. 85 points would have been 1 point more than that. Then this past season, 79 points. 85 is 6 more than that. Where is, like, 85 seeming like crazy talk? Like, I don't get where, like, you say 85 points and people are like, oh my God, you're so positive. Like, oh, so I'm picking them to extend their NHL record long playoff drought, and I'm too positive. Like, so, like, I love it. Local evening news. Like, I love the interaction, but that's what I laugh about. It's like we're basically here admitting, like, yeah, we're gonna miss the playoffs again, and yet we're still too positive, which just tells you the state of the Buffalo Sabres.
And also, Bunty, too, like, my thought process on it, I'm going to be objective. I'm going to, see things how they are. And at least I'm going to say what I believe, obviously. Like, I'm not just going to spew bullshit. But at the end of the day, we're watching a team we've watched forever that, I'd rather see this team do well than not. I'm going to, put my hand up and say the Sabres doing well is great, because I like watching this team do well. It's great for the city of Buffalo. Like, the amount of old clips I've seen posted from Sabres Classic on Twitter of just the mayhem in that arena, in the 90s, early 2000s, everything up until, obviously recent years. Even the Sabre Metrics posted the prospect game from 2015, so 2016. It was like 17,000 people there to watch a development scrimmage where, you have Eichel, Reinhart, and like Evan Rodriguez and some crazy names on the lineup chart. Like, the Sabres doing well is going to bring that back. And I don't think there's anything we want more than to see the city of Buffalo love the Sabres again.
100%, man. And I lived those.
Yeah.
I grew up wondering, what was it like watching the Bills in the Super Bowls in the 90s, because I was only alive for 3 of them and I was a baby and a toddler. And so I have no memories of that. So most of my Bills growing up from, like, the age of, like, 9 to, like, 26, 27 was missing the playoffs in the record drought. And I remember posting on Facebook in, like, 2016, am I ever going to see the Bills in the playoffs? And, like, boy, has a lot changed in the last,
it happened quick,
like,
too.
9 years. And it happened really quick. And that's kind of how I feel with the Sabres sometimes. Like, I lived those years in the late 90s. I don't remember the Eastern Conference Finals run against Washington, but, like, I remember the run to the Stanley Cup Finals. I was old enough to, like, know what I was watching. I was in elementary school, but, like, I enjoyed watching Michael Pekka and Dominic Hasek, Alexei Zhitnik, and all of them go to the Cup. They were even good in the years after that. Like, they had another chance to make a run a couple years later, and then unfortunately blew a 3-2 series lead over Pittsburgh with probably the worst goal Dominic Hasek allowed in his career to end Game 7 in overtime against Darius Kasparaitis. But even, like, the Briere Drury days, like, that's what everybody always talks to. But, like, the city lit up for those teams. Like, that was – the Sabres were more relevant than the Bills in Buffalo during that time. And it's crazy telling that to people that are all about Josh Allen and everything. The Sabres, not in the beginning of it, because they kind of came out of nowhere, but that was what made it such an explosive, fun time. The Sabres were a team with no expectations, coming out of an NHL strike where the season was canceled on a 3-year playoff drought, which was then the Sabres' record playoff drought at that time. Now you can multiply that times 5. But nobody was high on hockey. The Sabres didn't even have a television contract entering the 05-06 season because Empire Sports Network went down. So it took a couple games into the season for MSG to exist. They didn't start the season amazing. They were pretty average. And then, like, December, January, they got hot, and they just carried it the rest of the year even in the first round against Philadelphia, they were picked by most people to lose. They were picked by people to lose against Ottawa in the second round, and they got within 20 minutes of going to the Stanley Cup. And then the next year they did it again. And then unfortunately ownership screwed them over by letting players walk. But like this city was insane, Gatesy. Like you wouldn't like they were making out like medallions that you could go to Wilson Farms.
I still have a couple on my desk here. I'll see if I can find them. I think my cat knocked them down, but
it was magical, man.
I collected the
to feel what that feels like. And I'll say this.
Yeah.
The Bills, I am Bills before Sabres. Like that's I love the Bills are my number one and the Sabres are my number two. I know for you it's probably reversed. But like I'm obviously obsessive about both.
Obviously.
Nothing in my Bills fandom has ever gotten to the point of what the Sabres were in 05, 06, and 06, 07. Nothing during my entire Bills fandom has ever gotten to that point because we really thought we were going to win a cup. In the Bills, there's always that Kansas City over your shoulder, like question. Yeah. So if the Sabres ever got to that point where they were relevant again, I was at that game.
Yeah.
Double overtime, Danny Breer, game winner. The Campbell hit. Like you've probably seen it. Like that was in front of me. Like unreal, man. Like this city, dude, it'd be like something you've never seen before.
Yeah. And speaking of things, Bunty, you've never seen before. We got some great stuff on the Trainwreck Sports Etsy. I'm going to try to do this on the fly for folks at home. We got this. I'm going to make it a little bigger so everyone can see, but we have, this Trainwreck hat. We have some dad hats. We have shirts. We have Crossing Swords stuff. We have Pay the Bills merch items. Use code CSPOD at checkout. That is CSPOD at checkout for 10% off. Also helps out myself and Bunt just a little bit. But Bunty, we're kind of closing things up here. Do you have any final thoughts on this is offseason ahead? Like it's July 7th as of right now, 8:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're still waiting on Bowen Byram. But for fans who maybe don't follow the Sabres closely or, maybe that do you have kind of any closing thoughts to go in this offseason?
Yeah. It's easy to hate this team. Like you don't need to try. And groupthink on Twitter is toxic. It kills this team. And I'm not saying to love the team. I'm not saying to like believe in them or say they're going to be a playoff team. All I would ask is there's clearly a new vision in place than what they've had for a very long time. And it's much different approach. And I do think I'm not saying Adams deserves the benefit of the doubt because he doesn't. He's been here for now going on 6 years. But Lindy Ruff coming back as a head coach deserves an opportunity to build a team in his vision. And that's the only way you'll know if his vision has a chance at succeeding or not. So while I'm not saying to believe in them, I'd say maybe before you grill them or hate them, try to see what they're trying to do because I can kind of can feel I can see what they're doing and it makes sense to me. And I guess as far as the rest of the offseason, not much is going to go down. The only other thing that's going to happen is this Byram trade. We'll have a reaction podcast about it at that point in time regarding whatever they get in return. And then it's going to be quiet until the regular season and the preseason. And then it'll be fun times, hopefully, at that point going forward. So basically, we just have to wait out the Byram trade, and then it's going to be quiet times for the next couple months. Yeah, and shout out Richard, long podcast tonight. You should have saw the draft spectacular. We were going for 3 hours, Bunty, at least. Appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. A ton of comments. Make our life fun. Make this, I like having this go back and forth. Bunty, were you ever able to go to the odd? Never was taken there. I was a little bit too late for that. My first games were around 98, I think. So a couple years after. But that's fair. I wish, but unfortunately not. Yeah, I hear all the stories from my dad on what that was like there. And like we said earlier, we want, that feeling to come back. Appreciate, Richard, Steve, local evening news, Joseph, ton of names here. I don't have time to scroll through all of them. But appreciate you guys commenting throughout the night, going back and forth, because, we're all in this together. This drought's 14 years. We're moving through it. And I'm just kind of reiterate what Bunty said.
we're looking at that Byram deal. That's basically, the big thing. And from this point, we're going to try to enjoy this offseason because, we're less than 100 days away from Sabres games being here. The schedule will be out, I think, next week. I think they said between July 14th and 16th, the schedule will come out. Cigarettes inside I didn't even comprehend that could be a thing. There's some
the world was different before you were born.
World was different. Thanks, Richard. Have a great night as well. Appreciate the over 4,500 people who tuned in on Monday night in the middle of July to talk Buffalo Sabres. But Bunty, hey, let's have a great offseason.
Let's go. We'll be back.